Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. I am so excited to have this lovely lady next to me back on my podcast because Shannon and I connected about 2 and a bit years ago, or roughly 2 years ago. And we had an interview on the podcast when it was still called Up Spiral Grief. So I said to Shannon, I do want you back on my podcast because our conversation was just so beautiful and I think really, really necessary for a lot of people to hear. So I would I am not sure what happened with YouTube.
Up spiral
I
grief.
think
So I said
we
to
are
Shannon,
live
I
now. Let
do
me just
want
please.
you back on my podcast.
It's been a little bit of a technical glitch this morning, so I was allowing my neighbor to piggyback on my internet because she's got internet issues. So I really hope this is not affecting our conversation here. So once again, Shannon Traphagen, welcome to our podcast, Unsilencing Grief. Would you please do us the honor to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, everybody. It's so great to be here again. I'm Shannon Traphagen, and I am the host of the Game on Glio podcast and the owner of Right Life Media. Marie and I connected 2.5 years ago. I think it was 2.5 years ago. And I had had her story on my show, and she had had me on her show as we were both kind of sharing our grief journeys and being young widows in a world that doesn't really talk about young widow and young widowerhood quite as much when going through very young loss. And so, that was really how our stories kind of started. And you provided a lot of really interesting feedback. Like there was just this really synergistic energy between us when we were talking. And, for anybody who, doesn't know, I lost my husband about almost 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years next month
Yeah.
that I lost him to brain cancer. And he was only 45 years old. So, when you're 43, you're in the prime of life. You're not expecting to be confronted with that kind of journey so early on. And it takes a lot to climb out of that kind of hole. On top of, we also lost a baby during that process and had miscarriages. And so there was a lot of loss. And then I lost some in-law family after the death and some secondary losses that
Yeah.
people don't talk about. So you go through a lot of change very quickly all of a sudden, and then you're just expected to figure it out
Yeah.
and figure
I
out how to cook.
I want to just say something here because yesterday, in preparation for today's talk, I rewatched our episode from 2 years ago, just to refresh my memory on a couple of details. And there's, I was just really so deeply touched by the amount of loss. There was such accumulated loss that you were experiencing back then. There was
Yeah.
this anticipatory loss, and there was the actual loss of your husband. As you just said, you just brushed through it, but the miscarriage after miscarriage was a really, really big factor. And also, you and your husband were right in the middle of the adoption process when
Yeah.
that happened. Can you share a little
Yeah.
bit about that? Because it's such a big thing, and I think there are so many people out there listening to this who think I'm so alone in this journey. You and I
Yeah.
were both like in the midst of our lives when it happened, and usually with widowhood we think of an old lady, and it's actually not. There's a lot
Yeah.
of loss that happens in young years. So I'm glad that you and I are here to talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think that there's so many things that we don't talk, you don't expect to be confronted with that kind of loss so
Mm.
early on in life. You're not expected to see death in that way in your 30s and 40s and early 50s. And you do think that this is something you're confronted with when you hit your 60s and your 70s. And, you kind of feel like you're working up towards that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it really happens so much more than people realize. And when Mike was diagnosed, before he was diagnosed, we had had so many miscarriages, and physically they were painful, but
Mm.
emotionally they were also really heavy. And the only thing that was getting me through was the fact that we were also in the process of adapting,
Mm.
and we were healthy and we had our home and we had our dogs. And so I was like, we had our foundation, we had our pillars. And so even though I felt like things weren't working according to plan,
Yeah.
I was okay, you know, and I was like, I can deal with the miscarriages because we're still going to be parents in some way, shape, or form. And so when he got diagnosed, we were already in the process and had gone through pretty much the entire pregnancy with a young woman in another state
Yeah.
here in the United States. And we were 6 weeks away from bringing this little girl home. And that in and of itself was a process. You have to go to that state for 3 or 4 weeks once the baby, you have to finalize everything. There's tons of paperwork, there's lawyers involved. So that's a process. And yet, then all of a sudden we get handed this deadly diagnosis. And, you know, when he was 44, and we didn't know what to do with it. We didn't even know how to process any of this. And so we said, we're going to wait until you start treatment and figure out exactly what we're dealing with. And then we'll figure this out because we have a little time. And unbeknownst to us, once we told the adoption agency what was going on, they said he basically just got handed a death sentence. We can't move forward. And so we were dumbfounded. We didn't know what to do. We didn't feel like we had support in that way, you know, so we told the
Also,
birth
like you don't
mom.
have any say in that, you know,
We
because
didn't,
if
yeah, we didn't
your
have any
baby and you're
say. And we
pregnant,
didn't know,
you
yeah, we
go
didn't know how to move
either
forward.
or. But yeah, for somebody then to say, well, no, you know, we pull a plug, that's so brutal.
Yeah. Especially when you're that far along,
Yeah.
you know, and there was financially, there was a lot invested, emotionally, there was a lot invested. So yeah, you know, when we told the birth mom, she was devastated and she didn't care. She was like, I still want you guys. And if something happens, you'll be an amazing single mom.
Mm.
She didn't really care, but we didn't know how to proceed forward because now we were looking at, do we get private attorneys involved? Now we're looking at a private adoption. How
Yeah.
do I go down there? Well, he's in treatment. There were so many factors and his treatment was starting to take a toll.
Mm.
And we were seeing that. And I was like, I can't leave him right now to go do that for 3 or 4 weeks. There's just no way. So we ended up losing the adoption. Um, it was actually this time of year. It was in September,
Yeah.
and it was in 2019. And then he made it about 14 months, and then it was in 2020, 4 years ago in October of 2020, that he passed away. So 14 months after losing our little girl, he died.
Mm.
And so the sheer amount, the sheer weight of all that, and then within probably 3 or 4 months after that, I lost some of my in-law family
Mm.
um, that just needed somebody to blame for the loss, and which devastated me. And so it just kind of kept piling on
Yeah.
one after the next. And so it
Mm.
that can really bury you
Yeah.
if you aren't aware of how it's making you feel and you're not willing to get up and do something about it pretty quickly, it
Yeah.
can bury you.
Yeah. First of all, you're incredible. May I just say that straight out? You are incredible. I'm so in awe of how gracefully and beautifully you walk this path. And I fully understand that behind the scenes, it was obviously not always that gracefully and beautiful.
No.
I hear you. But looking at you and the journey that you've been through, with all the cards that you've been dealt with, you played a freaking amazing hand, I may say. It's just really like I'm so grateful that we're connected. It's just beautiful, really. And I'm so happy that you're sitting here today with the way you are and how you have healed to tell this story. So I would like to delve a little bit more into that healing journey because this is what we're here
Mhm.
for. You know, this is what people are hanging to hear on this
Mhm.
podcast, Unsilence Grief. Let's talk about the grief, but let's also talk about how did you heal through that? What were your steps? What were, if you could highlight a couple of bullet points, what was the most important part for you on your healing journey to get from where you were 4 years ago to here?
So, you know, it's interesting. And I will say for anybody who's going through this, you're always going to be in some form of healing journey when you go through something like this. The healing never really stops. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people, the misconception that a lot of people perceive when it comes
Yeah.
to grief, especially heavy grief,
Mm,
that the healing, eventually you get to a point where everything is just all better and everything's okay and you're done.
mm,
And that's not really how this process works. You're always healing, but it takes on different forms. And so it's almost like peeling another layer of the grief away, and you're moving into another stage and another part of the healing journey, and you're getting a little stronger and a little stronger. And that was something that within the first probably 2 or 3 months after Mike died, I realized really quickly that if I don't start confronting my grief now and getting ahead of it and figuring out the best ways that are going to help me heal, I'm going to drown in this grief because it's so heavy.
yeah.
And it wasn't pretty. It's not a pretty process. I spent a year sleeping on the couch in the family room because I could not sleep in our bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
So I slept on a couch for an entire year before I worked my way back to sleeping upstairs in our bedroom. So, it's not easy. But one of the first things I did, and I would highly recommend this for anybody because I think it's such an important piece, especially when you're the caregiver. You have a tendency to lose sight of your own health and wellness during the period that you're dealing with your loved one's illness. And so
Mm,
you kind of go to the wayside, even if you're doing little things like going for walks or you're trying to take a breather, you're not really taking care of yourself like you normally would. And
mm,
so I realized, I've kind of noticed after he died that how much weight I had lost
mm,
and how unhealthy I felt. And I also hadn't done any of my annual exams.
mm,
So I made it a point to go in. I said, my dental, my gynecology, my mammogram, like colonoscopy, all
mm,
of these things that had gotten shoved over here, I now made top priority. And I said, okay, I need to focus on taking care of me. I need to make all of these appointments. I need to get back on track with this. I need to start paying attention to my diet
mm,
because I wasn't eating very well.
yeah.
And that was the first step. Though that was literally, those were the first steps that I took to kind of just walk myself through the beginning stages, because as long as I was putting some attention on some internal love for myself and focusing on my own health,
I think you
that
hit the
was,
nail on the head here because it's the internal love, the self-love
yeah.
that is so,
Mhm.
so important in the journey. And I've been through my own huge ups and downs with weight loss and weight gain, like after Rob passed. And I realized, it is something when you feel that your life is completely spinning out of control and you're just standing there reeling and not knowing where to start, what to do first. Those steps, they are so simple, but they're not easy in that moment.
No.
They're like
Yeah.
really not easy. And I realized that with my own journey through that, I had left out exactly that, what you just said. The most important part was self-love. I
Hmm.
did it because I felt, oh, there's something that I've got in control. I can control how I eat, what I eat. I became like really, really healthy
Hmm.
physically, but the
Hmm.
self-love was still missing. So I went on this huge piling all the weight back on and then losing it again and on. And it was not just a little bit, it was a lot. So I had my own journey through that. And there is something to be said about there's something you're in control of.
Yeah.
And I realized the missing factor was self-love. So
Hmm.
can you dive into that a little bit more? How did you connect to that? How did you find that and foster that part?
So for me, one of the biggest things, um, for some reason, I felt like I needed to do something I hadn't done before.
Mm,
I needed a motivation to get off the couch, to get out of the house. And for me, I was afraid that if I didn't get out among people, that because socialization, and that's something that I don't think people realize. I'm a very social being. I'm in
mm,
the media. I do a lot of stuff on television and stuff. And I didn't want being around people was so overwhelming. And that took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting that
mm,
piece of the grief. even being around my family, if I was around more than 2 or 3 people, it was
Mm.
too much. It was too overwhelming. I got very anxious. And so in those first like 5 or 6 months, I realized I need to do something to connect with new people
Yeah.
outside of the people that know us. And I need a reason to get off the couch. I need a reason to do my hair and to put clothes on. And so for me, that was sports.
Hmm.
It was athletics, and it was something that had always been part of my life,
Hmm.
but it was in the middle of winter, so I couldn't exactly go out and cycle, which is something I normally do. And so I decided to pick up rowing
Hmm.
because I knew that this was something I hadn't done before.
Hmm.
Being on the water was really peaceful. So as I got into the
Beautiful. Yeah.
spring of that
Yeah.
year, and we were entering 2021, I said, I'm going to sign up for rowing. And I ended up being very good at it. And I got asked to be on the crew team for the local rowing club.
Hmm.
And it was not only something where I had to be up early every morning, 3 to 4 days a week,
Yeah.
but it held me accountable to staying fit and going and working out with certain individuals from our team in the
Yeah.
gym on days when it wasn't nice. I was
Mm.
interacting and meeting new people. They had certain regattas on certain weekends and races, and it just gave me purpose in a
Yeah.
way too, but it was part of that self-love journey. It was, what can I do that's new and different, but is still physically and emotionally healing for myself and is giving me a reason to leave the house. And so it started with that, and then I would add something onto that every year. And whether that was keeping up with my physical exams,
Mm.
paying better attention to my diet, starting the podcast to help others and finding purpose and helping others.
Yeah.
I went to counseling,
Mm.
and for everybody that is everybody has their own journey with it. And so you have to figure out what the right fit is for you. But I
Yeah.
knew for me, I needed somebody that could just be a support
Yeah.
system for me.
And I
So
think,
there's all these little
so
pieces for
just
that.
very quickly, I think that's such an important point that you raised there, because often when we are in this space of taking care of ourselves and then there is this point of you need somebody to offload that. There's one thing
Mhm.
of taking care of your health and doing something. And I think it's beautiful that you pick rowing because it's such a team sport. So there is this, I
Yeah,
can't let the team down. And it gives you extra motivation to show up
yeah.
rather than doing something on your own for yourself. And
Mhm.
I want to congratulate on doing that because it's just such a beautiful choice to do that. In particular, when you're like, I noticed that too after Rob died. I was such a social butterfly. We loved entertaining. We always, entertain, had people over. And after Rob passed, I was very much like one or two people, that even still to the day now, I don't enjoy being in big crowds anymore. And I've
Mhm.
learned to just accept that about me. I don't have to do that. I was thinking,
Yeah.
maybe I felt like a bad mom for a while because I thought I have never taken my boys to a concert, and then I talked to them about it one day. I was like, Mom, we honestly would not, and I realized they were the same. They would probably
Yeah.
love the experience, but not the idea of hundreds of people around them. So I'm like, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. So I think it's really, really important that we all find what works for us in that
Yes.
situation, whether that's a positive psychologist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a coach, a close friend, but somebody where you can actually release things
Mhm.
that come up for you. Because there's
Right.
the, getting positive things into your life, but there's also the letting go of the things that actually hurt you. And if you don't
Yeah.
do that, then, you start
Well,
piling them.
then yeah, because where does it go? I mean, you can write in a journal, and a lot of people do, and it is helpful, but there's also an emotional connection and an emotional release when you're able to tap into somebody else to talk to and to bounce things off of. And even if it's just, I mean, I've got two best friends that when I'm having bad moments, I mean, just a few months ago, I had a day where I was driving and I sat at the park, I parked the car, and I called each of them separately. And I was just bawling my eyes out because it was the first time in 3.5 years that I felt angry, that
Mm.
I was that I was in this, that I'm single. I'm single. I'm in my mid to late 40s. I'm going through hormonal changes.
Mm.
This sucks. This is awful. And I didn't ask for this. And how did I get here? And it was kind of this moment, and I just needed them. And they
Mm.
were there and they listened, and I cried and I got done and I drove home and I was like, okay, that
Thanks.
was, I just needed that. I needed that in that moment.
Yeah.
So, it's so important
Yeah.
to be aware,
Mm.
to be aware of yourself, to be aware of how you're feeling, to notice if, do I care about my health? Am I, with
Yeah.
now that somebody's gone, am I paying attention? Do I even care if I'm healthy or not? Do I care that I'm losing weight? Do I care that I'm not eating? Do I care that I'm not sleeping? If you're saying, no, I don't care, then there's a bigger concern going on, and you need to get ahead of that, because that can be a dangerous spiral that you don't want to head down. But it's so important to be able to say, you know what? And I used Mike as motivation. There were so many moments where I said, Mike would not want me to
Yeah.
let myself slip. He would not want anything bad to happen to me because of what happened to him. He would
Yeah.
be devastated.
Yeah.
And I used that as motivation to
Yeah.
really push myself forward.
I love this so much because I've worked with this role reversal, I call it, a lot myself. What would Rob do, or what would Rob want me
Mhm.
to do? Or
Yeah.
a very generic one, what would love do? I really love
Yeah.
that. Um, I think I want to come back to what we just touched on before, the having the feeling of being in control of something, because I think
Mhm.
that's the deciding factor here for a lot of people. When you just said, if you can answer yes to that, I don't
Mhm.
care, then
Mhm.
there's something bigger at play. And for me, there is this, what else could you be in control of, rather than and it's often subconscious, that I'm in control of, that I'm not eating, that people
Mhm.
don't think that is a control mechanism, but there is that subconscious trigger for that. So
Mhm.
once you actually know that and uncover that, you can ask yourself, well, what would I rather be in control of?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
the choices that you made. I could go and try rowing. I could go and try something completely different I've never done before.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really, really important thing. And the other thing that I really want to highlight that you said before, I really love that you say we're never done with healing. I
Mhm.
actually think it's part of the human experience,
Yes.
embracing a healing journey, because for me, it's also that growth that happens with that,
Mhm.
with the healing. People often use that, "Oh, grief will stay with you forever," and I have
Mhm.
to disagree with that. I
Mhm.
treat it differently. I think it's just a different perspective. Maybe we're talking about the same thing here, but I like that I have a different perspective on that. I would like to share it with you, and I would like to hear how you feel about it and how you treat it, because I often use the comparison that I said, Joy is a permanent resident in my house. Sometimes
Mhm.
she goes out shopping, but she'll always come back. She lives here. Grief is a visitor. She doesn't live here. She comes in every now and then. I allow her in. I make her a cup of
Mhm.
tea. If I have time, I'll sit with her. I might cry with her. I might just listen to the message that she brings, and then I bid her farewell. And
Mhm.
funny enough, often they pass each other by the door. Joy's coming back from shopping,
Yes.
Grief's leaving. I'm like, oh, you just missed people. That's a sort of imagery that I work with when I think of grief. And I'm not saying that grief will, like, I don't like the idea of grief will stay with me forever, because I also don't say there'll always be a hole in my heart. No, there'll always be a space in my heart for Rob. That's the sort of language that I use. That's a sort of imagery that I use. How does that land with you? Where do you stand with that?
I think that's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful image. It's a great way to create a new narrative around the journey that you're going through. And I think that that is really, it's also a great way because, and it's something that my counselor has said to me many, many times, there isn't this or that. It's
Mm,
not this, but that.
mm,
It's this and.
yeah.
And so when you say that grief and joy are passing each other, That's really what it is. In the beginning stages, yes, grief pretty much has a permanent resident for a while. And it takes a while to move into a phase where you can hold space for both the
Yep.
grief that might come up as well as joy that might start to become present in your life. And you don't have to feel guilty about that. You can
Yeah.
hold space for both.
Thank you. Did you
And
all hear
then
that? Can you just repeat that, please?
you don't have to feel guilty about that. You can hold space for both. And it really is, you can have this feeling and feel this at the same time or in similar moments. And I've been saying this a lot lately, and it's kind of been a mantra of mine that you grow through what you go through.
Mm.
And
Oh, I love it.
life, even when it's really hard, and we all have knocks in life, and for everyone, it looks different. And for some people, it's much harder than and darker than for others. But life is all about teachable moments and about growing. And you can't grow as a human being if you're not learning. And the only way to learn is to have stumbling blocks and to have things come up in life that teach you.
Mm.
And, you know, I'll be honest, I mean, after losing all that I've lost, I really took a step back and all of a sudden it was like, wow, I was not present
Mm.
at all. Like I was so focused on the next thing, the
Yeah.
next step in the career,
Yeah.
having a baby,
Mm.
being a family, our next house, moving. What does life look like 5 years down the road? Everything is so great. And I was always grateful. And I always took a minute to say, I'm so grateful for everything that we have. And then I
Mm.
would turn around and say, okay, this is what we have to plan for. This is what we have to do.
Yeah.
And once my life imploded, it literally forced me to be present and in all honesty to lose control.
Mm.
And that's really, when we talk about needing to have control over something, I think the biggest thing we can do is to let go of control and to be able to say, you know what, I might be able to do something that brings me joy and I can take care of my health. And that
Yeah.
is something that I can try to control. You don't know what's going to happen, and I can be the best dog parent I can be to my dog, and I can be the best friend and the best family member, and I can do these things, but it's okay to not have control
Yeah.
over what may or may not happen in life. As
Yeah.
long as I put my best foot forward and I continue trying to do the best things I can do to take care of myself, to take care of those around me, to support others, and to continue being open and to learning. And that's a really freeing experience because once you can sit there and say, I don't really have control and I can do certain things to empower myself
Yeah.
and to feel balanced and
Mm.
to bring some joy back into my life, but somebody else is taking the wheel. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the passenger seat, and I have to have faith in that. And I have to trust whatever life is trying to teach me, so to speak. And there's just something very freeing about that. And it's scary. It is very scary. It is not the easiest
Yeah.
thing in the world to do.
There's something to be said about deepest surrender and trust in that very moment. And it's magical, but it is scary. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Shannon, we've got a couple of minutes left. Can you please share a little bit about your podcast? How did you come up with this idea, and what is it that you talk about in your podcast?
Yeah. So I started the podcast in 2021 when nobody else was talking about brain cancer in that way. I'm a storyteller, I'm an author, so I was really just looking for a way to reach a very broad audience very quickly. And of course, you're in the middle of the pandemic, podcasts were booming. And I said, well, I used to do radio, I did voiceover work, I used to do a lot of television stuff. I'll do a podcast. Let's put a podcast together. Let's highlight patient stories and give them the platform. And that
Beautiful.
was really how it came to be. always want celebrities and big names. I wanted the people who felt like they didn't have a voice and that were going through this really scary thing and nobody was listening to them.
Yeah.
And so that was really what kind of spurred me to start it.
Mm.
And so that was kind of how it came to be. And so we titled it Game on Glio because that was mine and my husband's motto. We wanted to take this head on,
Yeah.
and game on, bring it on.
Yeah.
And glio is short for glioblastoma.
Mm.
And it just exploded globally. And we ended up getting sponsors, and we're now in our fourth season, and we've got about 44 episodes out. We have
Mm.
a fifth season coming. And we've actually changed the formula a little bit. You know, we're highlighting second chance love stories. We're
Mm.
telling more stories of hope and resilience, as
Yeah.
well as our brain cancer stories and advocacy. So it's really kind of transpired and transformed into this amazing storytelling platform that is just giving people hope and inspiration.
Yeah. I love this so much, and you know that this is actually the first time I understood where the title was coming from. I don't think we talked about it last time, so I absolutely
Oh, we didn't.
no. It makes so much sense. I don't know why I never asked you that, but I'm really grateful that
Yeah,
you shared that part. So unfortunately, we're at the end of the time, and it always happens way too fast.
I
So
know, right?
I really would love for you to give people an idea where they can find you, where they can follow you. And of course, we will be sharing that in the show note as well, but in the show notes. But yeah, if you don't mind sharing where people can follow you, connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody that wants to, you know, we're very personable on social media. So Game on Glio podcast is our Instagram handle. On Facebook, we're at Game on Glio. We have a YouTube channel, so Game on Glio podcast on YouTube. And then anybody that wants to can visit our website where we actually showcase our sponsors and different bio stories and kind of go into depth about the bios of our guests on there. And that's the Game on Glio podcast.com.
Awesome.
So very easy to find for anybody who wants to.
Nicely done. Oh, Shannon, I always love our conversations because they are so open and real. I love how you share your story. And yeah, I cannot wait to hear what's next for you.
Thank
And
you.
I'm looking forward to following your journey. I absolutely admire what you've done out of, yeah, your beginning accumulated grief package that you were dealt with to now spread so much love and hope and healing into the world. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. It was
Thank
amazing.
you. We always have such great conversations, and you are just as much of an inspiration to me, and I'm so blessed to know you and to have become friends with you. So it's always amazing to talk to you. You always leave me with thoughts that I'm having after I get done talking to you. And I'm like, huh, that's right. Like deep thoughts.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. So
Thank
every
you,
time you're
everybody.
watching this, if you get value out of that, please do share that with whoever you just thought of, such and such should listen to this. Please share it with that person. Hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell to never miss a live episode of Unsilenced Grief. And
Mhm.
I wish you all a wonderful day, evening, or day ahead, wherever you are. This is Shannon and Marie signing off.